Hello friends, this is Sanjay from Lawment. Welcome to part 4 of this video series where we will be looking at all the passages and the questions from the CLAT PG 2021 previous question paper. In this part, that is part 4, we will be covering passages 7 and 8. Passage 7 has been taken from a case titled Padia Timber Company versus the Board of Trustees of Visakhapatnam Port Trust. Now this case is quite important because this happens to be one of the landmark cases when it comes to contract law in India, and the importance of this case is also probably highlighted in the fact that in the 2021 paper there were two passages, passage 7 and passage 19, which were taken from the same case. So let us get started. Passage number 7 has been taken from the Padia timber case that I mentioned about earlier. Now I have not specifically mentioned the name of the case here because one of the questions for this particular passage asks us to identify the name of this particular case. The length of this passage is 130 words, and this is an extremely short passage. This is just a paragraph. So you can pause the video here and read through this paragraph, and let's move on to the questions. Question number 37 is asking us to identify that based on the given excerpt, which of the following judgments is related to the acceptance of a conditional offer. Now this is a general awareness question because this, among the given options, the 2021 case, that is the Padia timber case, happens to be a landmark case in which the court kind of reiterated a fact that the offer and acceptance must be absolute. And when the acceptor puts in a new condition while accepting the contract that is already signed by the proposer, then the agreement is not complete until the proposer agrees with that particular condition. That is, if A drafts a contract which he believes is the final version of the contract, signs it and sends it to B, and B at the time of signing that particular document decides to insert a new clause or a new condition into it, and he signs it and sends it back to A. This does not amount to a valid contract because the insertion of the additional clauses or the additional conditions by B makes this entire document a counter proposal. Now this counter proposal has to be again specifically agreed upon and signed by A, so that he specifies that or he agrees that this new condition which has been inserted by B is acceptable to him. Therefore, this is a case which is quite popular and has appeared in quite a few exams in the previous year, and it is very likely that there will be more questions based on this particular case law. Therefore, I would strongly urge you to actually go through the entire judgment of the Padia Timber Co. versus the Board of Trustees of Visakhapatnam Port Trust, which happens to be the correct answer in this case. Question number 38 is asking us that the acceptance must match with the terms of the offer. The given statement is known as which of the options? Now obviously this statement is nothing but the mirror image rule, which is a doctrine which requires that any acceptance must be unconditional and it has to assent to the terms of the original offer. The acceptance has to be for the same terms and pricing included in the original offer, or there would be no binding contract, and any changes in the details at the time of the acceptor's signature may be deemed to be a counter proposal and not an acceptance. As I have explained in the previous question, if A drafts a contract and believes that this will be the final version of the contract, and he signs it and sends it to B for his signature, and at the time of signing this particular document, B decides to insert some additional clauses or some additional terms into the contract. He signs it and sends it back to A. Now what A has received from B, because B has included these new terms or new conditions into the contract, then this has become a counter proposal and not an acceptance. What has to happen here is A has to read through the documents and specifically indicate that he is okay or he accepts the newly inserted terms and conditions. He should sign the document and send it back to B. Only then this will be a valid contract. Now among the given options, option C, which says mirror rule, is the correct answer here. In question number 39, we are being asked that which of the following judgments relates to the postal rule in a contract. Now this is a general awareness question, and in fact the Bhagwan Das Govardhan Das Kedia versus Girdharilal Purushottam Das case from the year 1966 is a landmark case that you should be very familiar with in the context of the contract law in India. Now, in this particular case, there was a discussion around whether the contract was formed at the place of acceptance or whether the acceptance or where the acceptance was received. Now, traditionally, in the case of a postal acceptance, then the acceptance is deemed to have happened at the place where the acceptor has signed the document and posted it. Whereas in case of a telephonic conversation or a telephonic acceptance, then the acceptance is deemed to be made at the offerer's place, since the communication is instantaneous. So this crucial difference was clarified in this particular landmark case. Now there are also some other differences, like in case of a postal acceptance, then the acceptance against the proposer is not deemed to have been completed till he or she receives the letter of acceptance from the acceptor which has been posted. So there is a time delay between when the letter is posted and when the proposer receives the acceptance, and he has the right to cancel that particular proposal in this interval. So there are plenty of nuances when it comes to the postal acceptance, which will not be applicable in case of a acceptance made through telephone. So I would strongly urge that considering that this particular case is a very important case from the context of the CLAT PG exam and also from the other LLM entrance examinations, I would strongly recommend that you should actually go through the details of this particular case and understand it in its entirety. Question number 40 is asking us that based on the given excerpt, that is the given passage, which of the following is correct? When we go through the information given within the passage, there is a part which says that an acceptance with a variation is not an acceptance. It is in effect and substance simply a counter proposal, which must be fully accepted by the original proposer before a contract is made. Now this part of the passage directly supports option A, which is the correct answer here. Just to reuse the same example that I have given earlier, if A believes that the terms and conditions on a contract have been finalized and he drafts it accordingly, signs it and sends it to B, and at the time of his signature, B decides to make some changes. He adds some clauses or deletes some clauses or makes any changes whatsoever in the document, signs it and sends it to A. Then this is not deemed to be a completed contract. This act of changing the original terms and conditions and inserting or deleting any of the details makes it a counter proposal, and A has to indicate that he accepts the changes that have been made in the document, sign it and send it back to B. Only then this would be a valid contract. So option A is the correct answer for this question. In question 41, we have been given a small problem and we have been asked to identify that based on the above facts, which of the following options is correct. Now when we look at this particular problem, it says that the university sent a letter regarding the offer of appointment to Mr. X at his postal address on a specific date. However, Mr. X received a lead or an advance notice about the dispatch of the offer from his friend Mr. Y, who happens to be an employee of the university. And upon knowing about the offer, Mr. X sent his acceptance through email at the official email ID of the university. And later, due to the restrictions and the guidelines issued by the authorities during the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. X failed to receive the letter sent by the university, whereas it was specifically mentioned that the communication for the acceptance was to be sent in writing through postal service at the official address of the university, and no other mode of communication would be accepted. So this was specifically mentioned in the letter that was sent by the university. Now the question is asking us that based on the given fact, which of the following is correct? The correct answer is that the acceptance made before completion of delivery offer is not valid. Now even when we look at the provisions of the Indian Contract Act, we see that acceptance, if it is made before the completion of the delivery of the offer, it is not a valid acceptance. And also, as per section 7(2) of the Contract Act, acceptance has to be made in the same manner as prescribed in the proposal. In this particular incident, Mr. X has signified or has indicated his acceptance and sent his acceptance email even before he received the actual letter sent by the university. Therefore, the acceptance has been done before the completion of the delivery of the offer. Therefore, it will not be valid. And the second aspect is that he sent the acceptance by email, whereas the university had clearly specified that the acceptance has to be made in by sending a postal confirmation to the official address of the university, and also mentioned that no other mode of communication would be accepted. Therefore, since Mr. X has accepted by email and not actually sent an acceptance letter, then his acceptance is again not valid. Therefore, option B, that acceptance before completion of delivery of offer is not valid, is the correct answer here. Question number 42 is asking us which of the following is correct about acceptance of offer in a contract. So after we evaluate all the 4 answer choices, we see that this is essentially talking about the basics of contract law in India. And this is also a general awareness question because the correct answer is directly based on Section 8 of the Indian Contract Act. Now, Section 8 of the ICA talks about acceptance by performing conditions or receiving consideration. It says that the performance of the conditions of a proposal or the acceptance of any consideration for a reciprocal promise which may be offered with a proposal is an acceptance of the proposal. Now, with this definition in mind, let's look at a small example. If there is a vendor sitting with a bunch of coconuts on a street corner, so I go to him, I offer a 100 rupee note and I say I want to buy 4 coconuts, which means that I'm trying to buy each coconut at 25 rupees. So for 4 coconuts, I have offered him 100 rupees. Without saying anything, he just takes the note from my hand and puts it in his pocket. So this action of his, where he has heard my proposal and he has accepted the consideration that accompanied my proposal, which is the 100 rupee note, means that he has accepted my offer for me to buy the 4 coconuts from him for a price of 100 rupees. Therefore, this action can be construed as acceptance of the proposal. With this definition and example in mind, if you look at all the answer choices, we see that option D, which says that an absolute and unqualified acceptance may be inferred from the conduct of the offeree. So this statement is correct. Therefore, option D is the correct answer for this question. Passage 8 has been taken from a landmark Supreme Court judgment from the year 2018. I have not mentioned the name of the case here because obviously one of the questions associated with this passage is asking us to identify the case from which this passage has been extracted. The length of this passage is 277 words, which is very close to the 250 average across this entire question paper. You can pause the video here and read the passage on the screen, or you can go to lawmen.com and read the passage there and come back to the questions. Question 43 is asking us to identify that based on the given excerpt, which of the following judgments relates to euthanasia. In this case, we are specifically talking about the concept of passive euthanasia. Now, among the given cases, the Common Cause versus Union of India from 2018 is a landmark case which talks about passive euthanasia. This is a fairly long case. This is a little over 500 pages in length. And in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that a person of competent mental faculty, it is a person who is competent to take decisions on his own, is entitled to execute an advance medical directive. So this advance medical directive is essentially an instruction in the form of a living will, where the person may record his wish that he should not be kept alive with the help of ventilators or artificial life support systems in case he becomes incapacitated for any reason, and the doctors are given the authority that they can turn off these life support systems. Thus, this is a way of implementing passive euthanasia. Now, the answer for this particular case is option A, which is Common Cause versus Union of India. Question 44 is asking us that based on the given excerpt, which of the following is not correct regarding an advance medical directive. So the question is asking us to identify which of these statements is incorrect. Now, what is an advance medical directive? As we have already discussed in the previous question, An advanced medical directive is nothing but a living will, where a person writes down a specific instruction that in case something happens to me, wherein I'm incapacitated, I may have an accident or I may have a heart attack, and I have to be admitted into a hospital, and I am being kept alive only because of artificial life support systems. In such a situation, I would not like my life to be prolonged artificially, and I am giving an advanced medical directive to the medical professionals that in such a situation, I authorize you to turn off the life support system, and this is the way that I'll be committing passive euthanasia. Now, when we look at this particular passage, which has been taken from the common cause case, there is a part of the passage which supports one of the answer choices. That is, such a right by the individual does not depend on any recognition or legislation by a state. Now, this specifically mentions that there is no dependency on any recognition or legislation by a state. Now, option D says that the right to execution by an individual depends on the recognition or legislation by a state. Therefore, this statement is incorrect, and this will be the answer choice here. Now, I would also probably think of this particular question as a general awareness question, because as a law student, if you are aware of the latest legal happenings in India, you'll be able to read through the other answer choices and easily recognize that these are correct statements. And even in that way, from a general awareness perspective, you'll be able to identify which is the correct answer here. For example, the purpose and object of an advanced medical directive is to express the choice of a person regarding medical treatment in the event when he loses capacity to take such a decision. Obviously, we are talking about an advanced medical directive, and this is given with regards to the medical treatment such as life support systems, and this advanced directive is specifically written down to account for eventuality where the person loses capacity to take a decision at that point. So if that person is admitted in a hospital and kept on artificial life support system, he is giving an advanced medical directive that please turn it off. So this is a correct statement. Then option B says that the right of execution by an individual does not depend on any recognition or legislation by a state. This is also a true statement, and this is expressly supported by the information provided within the passage. And option C says it is also known as a living will. As we discussed, advanced medical directive is part of a living will. Therefore, option C is also true. Therefore, we are left with one statement, which is option D, which is the incorrect statement here. Question number 45 is asking us which of the following is not correct as per the Supreme Court judgment in the Gyan Kaur versus State of Punjab case from the year 1996. Now, there have been cases prior to this landmark case, and there are cases which were decided after 1996 where the opinion of the Supreme Court might be different from the opinions expressed in this specific case. However, for the sake of answering this question, you should focus only on this case, and you should answer with respect to what was decided by the Supreme Court in this specific case. Now, when we look at the details of the Gyan Kaur case, the Supreme Court concluded that the right to life does not include the right to die. So this is a correct statement. The court also mentioned that the right to life is a natural right embodied in Article 21, but suicide is an unnatural termination or extension of life before due course. Therefore, it is incompatible with the rights embodied under Article 21. Therefore, this also is a correct statement. And in this case, the constitutional validity of Section 309 of the IPC was also challenged, and the Supreme Court held that this particular section is valid as per the Constitution. Therefore, statements A, B, and C are correct and are as per the decision in the Gyan Kaur case. The only statement which is incorrect is option D, which says that the right to life includes the right to die. This is against or opposite to statement A. Therefore, this particular statement is incorrect. And option D is the correct answer here. In question number 46, we are being asked that in the given judgment, that is in the given excerpt, which of the following was not held by the Supreme Court of India? Now, this is a direct question, because when we read through the passage, there is a part of the passage which supports or validates three of the answer choices, and therefore one of the answer choices which is not validated by the passage is the incorrect statement here. Now, if you look at the part of the passage which I am referring to, it says that the right to execute an advance medical directive is nothing but a step towards protection of the aforesaid right by the individual in the event that he becomes incompetent to take an informed decision in particular stage of life. It has been recognized by all, including the states, that a person has a right to execute an advance medical directive to be utilized to know his decision regarding the manner and extent of medical treatment to be given to his body in case he is incapacitated to take such an informed decision. Now, when we look at the answer choices, the first option says a person of competent medical mental faculty is entitled to execute an advance medical directive in accordance with the safeguards. This is absolutely correct. And when we look at option B, it says that an adult human being having mental capacity to take an informed decision has the right to refuse medical treatment, including the withdrawal of life-saving devices. This is precisely what passive euthanasia is all about, and the concept of living wills is based on this particular statement. Therefore, option B is also correct. And option D says, in case of incompetent patients, the best interest principle will be applied and such a decision will be taken by the specific competent medical experts. This is also a correct statement, and this is also logically correct because if a person has been brought to the hospital and if the doctors declare him to be brain dead, then while the person can be artificially kept alive with the use of life support systems, the doctors do have the capacity or the powers to declare the person as brain dead and withdraw the life support systems. Therefore, in case of incompetent patients who are not able to take a decision at that point in time because they are incapacitated, then the decision will be taken by the competent medical experts. Therefore, option D is also correct. Therefore, option C is the only option that is left, and this is not held by the Supreme Court of India, and this is not supported by the information provided within the passage. Question number 47 is asking us which of the following judgments does not relate to the constitutionality of the right to die. Now, there have been several cases where the right to die and the concept of passive euthanasia have been discussed by the Supreme Court. And one more point that I would like to repeat is what I've already mentioned in the previous question where we were talking about the Gyancore case, is that when the question is asking you about the decision of the Supreme Court in a specific case, focus only on that case and answer accordingly, because the previous decisions of the Supreme Court or the subsequent decisions of the Supreme Court might not match with the specific case that is being discussed. If you look at this particular question, we have the Maruti Shripati case and the P. Ratinam case, where the Supreme Court has held that section 309 of the IPC actually is violative of the Article 14, 19 and 21 of the Constitution and hence ultra vires of the Constitution. Whereas in the Gyancore case, the Supreme Court reversed this decision and said that section 309 of the IPC is not ultra vires of the Constitution. In any case, coming back to this question, we are being given a choice of 4 cases and asked to identify which of these does not relate to the constitutionality of the right to die or the concept of passive euthanasia. Now we can start off by eliminating some of the obvious answer choices. That is, the Aruna Ramchandra Shanbag case or the Aruna Shanbag case is a case that has been in the news quite frequently, and this is something which almost all law students will be familiar with. Therefore, this can be eliminated as this is a case that specifically discusses the concept of passive euthanasia. And the Maruti Shripati case is also something that is related to the concept of the right to die and can be eliminated from among the answer choices. And even the P. Ratinam case is also related to the constitutionality of the right to die and can be eliminated. So that leaves us with answer choice B, which is the D.S. Grewal versus Vimi Joshi case, which is not related to the concept that is being spoken about in the question, and this would be the answer here. In question number 48, we are being asked which of the following is not correct with regards to passive euthanasia as per the judicial precedents in India. Here we have to look at what is the current judicial opinion or the current status of the concept of passive euthanasia as per the Indian judicial system. Now, this particular question is based on the passage that is given, which has been extracted from the common cause case. And in the common cause case, the Gyankor case and the P. Ratinam case and the Aruna Shanbag case. All these three cases have been discussed in this particular decision taken in the common cause case, from where this particular passage has been extracted. And on 9th March 2018, in the common cause case, the Supreme Court of India legalized the concept of passive euthanasia by means of withdrawal of life support to patients in permanent vegetative state. Now, if you recollect, permanent vegetative state was also discussed in the Aruna Shanbag case. Therefore, the current legal opinion with regards to the concept of passive euthanasia says that it is legally permissible in India, and the concept of passive euthanasia entails the withholding of medical treatment for continuance of life, or the withdrawal of life support systems. Therefore, C is also correct. And option D says passive euthanasia is to avoid a prolonged agony, and that is the very reason why the concept of a living will or advanced medical directives are given. Therefore, A, C and D are correct statements. The statement B, which says that passive euthanasia is not legally permissible in India, is incorrect, and therefore that is the answer choice here. With that, we come to the end of this part of the video series, and I will see you again in the next part. Please do go to lawmint.com and try out the free demo mock tests, and you can enroll for the mock test and the previous paper series for CLAT PG, ILAT PG, IIT KGP LLM, DU LLM, BHU LLM and other popular LLM entrance exams. And you will also find mock tests and previous papers for the UGC NET Law paper 2. So I'll see you again in the next part of this series. Till then, take care and be safe.